The discharge paperwork sat on the rolling table beside Reeves's bed, waiting for a signature he hadn't yet provided. The doctor had explained the options the way doctors explain options, when they've already decided which one they're hoping for, but are professionally obligated to present all of them. Reeves could be discharged this afternoon if someone responsible was going to be with him for the first few days. Or he could choose to stay the additional 2 days voluntarily, finish the monitoring, let his numbers settle the rest of the way under observation, and use the time productively. Nutrition counseling. A walkthrough of what 1 hour a day was actually supposed to look like in practice, because the doctor had learned through experience that men like Reeves heard instructions like that and nodded, and then went home and did nothing differently. Reeves had been turning it over since Debbie left to bring the car around. The truth was simpler than the doctor's framing of it, and Reeves arrived at it the way he arrived at most things, by eliminating what didn't work until what was left was obvious. Debbie's house had Dolly in it. A 35-year-old woman who had just come home, who Debbie had been quietly working to keep separate from everything that had been happening, who didn't know about Joshua or the safe house or any of it. Reeves showing up to recover on her couch for several days was not a complication Debbie needed, and it wasn't one Reeves was willing to create. His own place was out for reasons that had nothing to do with comfort. Someone had been inside it. Someone who knew about the safe, the code, what was in it. He still didn't know who or what their connection was to the 5 cases, and until he did, going back there to recover, to be still, to be vulnerable, to be exactly the kind of target a man recovering from a heart attack becomes, wasn't a risk he was willing to accept. Not yet, and Jackie's was out for a different reason entirely. One Reeves turned over only briefly before setting it aside, because some things didn't need extended consideration to arrive at the correct answer. He did not trust himself, currently, around the best donut maker in the city. A doctor had just told him, in plain clinical language, that his diet needed to change immediately and permanently. And Jackie Lee's house was, among other things, the place where Jackie Lee kept things. Things she made. Things she had been quietly sneaking healthier ingredients into for years without his noticing, which was a different proposition entirely from a kitchen stocked with the genuine article, available, warm, and offered with love by a woman who expressed love partly through food. He would not survive that combination in week 1. When Debbie came back in, Reeves looked at the paperwork and then at her and said, "I'm staying the 2 days." Debbie looked at him for a moment with an expression that contained both surprise and the specific relief of a woman who had been quietly bracing for an argument she now didn't have to have. "Good," she said simply. "I want to learn what I'm supposed to be doing," Reeves said. "Properly, not just told and sent home to figure it out." Debbie sat down in the chair beside the bed and reached for her bag, and for a moment, Reeves thought she was reaching for the notepad. Instead, she pulled out a small, spiral-bound book, soft at the edges, the cover worn from years of handling. "In that case," she said, "I have something you should look at." Across the city, Joshua sat on the basement steps and finally let the questions land. They had been arriving for several minutes. Carmen standing in the middle of the basement, gesturing at the freezers, the shelves, the cookbooks, asking the same essential question in several different shapes, each one a slightly different angle on the same disbelief. "Did you know this was here? How long has it been here? Why didn't you say anything? Whose is this?" Joshua had been quiet through all of it. The careful blank quiet of someone deciding how to answer honestly without answering completely. He sat down on the steps, looked up at her. "I didn't know any of this was down here," he said, steady, looking her in the eyes because the truth, even a partial one, was easier to deliver while looking at someone than a lie ever was. "I just moved in, not long after you moved onto the street." He gestured at the freezers without looking away from her. "I'm guessing the last tenant left it. I know how that sounds, but it's true." Carmen looked at him for a long moment. Then, instead of pushing further, because something in his face told her that pushing wouldn't produce anything more than what she'd already gotten, and because some part of her recognized the shape of a person choosing carefully what to share, she asked a different question. "What have you been eating?" Joshua led her back up the stairs, through the kitchen, to the small trash can near the counter, where he tilted the lid and showed her, without ceremony, the 2 empty cans sitting inside it. Beans. Both of them. "I'm not much of a cook," Joshua said, "so I've been eating them straight out of the can." Carmen looked at the cans, then at him. Then something in her expression shifted into the specific warmth of someone who had just been handed an opportunity to do the thing she was best at. "Well," she said, "if you don't mind, I'll cook some of that." She nodded toward the basement door. "Bring me up a bag of the chicken and a few of the seasonings." Joshua looked at the basement door, then back at her. "Can we cook at your place?" he asked. Carmen tilted her head slightly. "Why? I just feel more comfortable there," Joshua said. It wasn't a lie. It also wasn't the reason, not the whole one, but it was true enough that he could say it and hold her eyes while saying it, and Carmen, who had spent her whole life learning which questions were worth asking twice and which weren't, simply nodded. "Sure," she said. "Bring it over whenever it thaws." "I'm bringing it right now," Joshua said. He went down, came back up with a bag of chicken thighs still mostly frozen and a small handful of seasoning containers tucked under his arm. Carmen walked toward the front door, and Joshua walked her out, the two of them crossing the small living room together. And at the door, she stepped out first and started across the street toward her own house, and Joshua stood in his doorway and watched her go for a moment before closing the door behind himself. He stood there with the bag of chicken in his arms. Then, quiet enough that the words went nowhere except into the empty room around him, he said it. "I refuse to have you in the house. Because of what happened at the last one." He stood with that for a second. Then he left with the door unlocked and walked across the street. Carmen's kitchen had come further along than the rest of her house. The pots and pans were hung where she'd decided they belonged on her first day. The cabinet above the counter held plates and glasses in their places. It was, of all the rooms in her new home, the one that already felt finished. Because, as she'd said to herself more than once since moving in, a kitchen was the heart of wherever she lived, and she'd built that heart first. She ran the chicken under cold water in the sink to help the thawing along, then set it in a bowl and left it on the counter. "It'll take a bit," she said. Joshua looked around the kitchen. At the seasonings he'd carried over now lined up on her counter beside her own modest collection. At the can of string beans she pulled down from her own cabinet. She had that much at least, something simple to round out whatever the chicken became. At the bag of dinner rolls sitting beside the bread box, which she opened and checked and nodded at, satisfied. "While that thaws," Carmen said, gesturing toward the next room, "come sit for a minute." Her bedroom was small. A mattress on the floor. She hadn't gotten a frame yet, hadn't decided if she wanted one, hadn't decided much of anything about this room, except that it was hers, and it was enough. A folded blanket. A window that let in the early afternoon light at an angle that made the whole room feel warmer than the bare walls had any right to. Carmen sat down on the mattress, and after a moment, Joshua sat beside her. They didn't talk much. The morning had been long, for both of them, in different ways neither one fully understood about the other, and the mattress was soft, and the light through the window was the specific gentle gold of early afternoon. And at some point, without either of them deciding to, the talking stopped, and the quiet took over. And the quiet was comfortable in the way that quiet only is between people who have stopped needing to fill it. Joshua fell asleep first. Carmen noticed, smiled slightly, and let herself drift not long after. When Joshua woke, the light through the window had shifted, the gold gone slightly deeper, the specific color of an afternoon that had moved into its later half without announcing the transition. He was alone on the mattress, and the apartment smelled like Debbie's kitchen. He lay there for a moment with his eyes open, just breathing it in. The specific combination of baked chicken and seasoning and something warm coming from an oven, a smell that reached backward through everything that had happened in the last several days and landed somewhere much further back than that. A kitchen, a table, someone setting a plate down in front of him without making him explain why he was hungry. He got up, walked into the kitchen, and Carmen was at the counter, oven mitts on, pulling a baking sheet out with the chicken golden and done, the smell of it filling the small kitchen completely. Beside the stove, a pot with the string beans warming, and on the counter, the bag of dinner rolls open, several of them already arranged on a plate. She looked up when he came in, smiled. "Perfect timing," she said. Joshua stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at all of it. The chicken, the beans, the rolls, the smell of it filling a kitchen that had been empty boxes and bare counters 2 days ago, and was now, somehow, a place where someone had just made dinner. Something in his chest did the thing it had been doing since the day he met her. Warm and specific, and located somewhere that had nothing to do with thinking. They ate at the small table, plates in front of them, and the conversation was easy the way it had been easy since the beginning. Small things, the kind of small things that told you who a person was without either of them performing anything. Carmen talked about the kitchen, about how good it felt to actually cook in it for the first time. Joshua ate more than he meant to. The specific hunger of someone whose body had been managing on outdated beans, finally being given something it actually wanted. When the plates were empty, Carmen stood and started gathering them, and Joshua stood too. "I should head back," he said. He moved toward the door. Carmen reached out and caught his wrist. Not forcefully, just enough, the specific gentle insistence of someone who had decided something and wasn't going to argue about it, just act on it. "Stay," she said. Joshua looked at her. She didn't say anything else, just held his wrist, and after a moment he let himself be pulled. Back toward the bedroom, back toward the mattress on the floor, back into the soft gold light that had deepened further now toward evening. They lay down beside each other. Neither of them said anything else. And somewhere in the quiet of that small room, with the smell of dinner still in the air, and the evening settling slowly over the street outside, sleep found them both again. Gentler this time, the kind of sleep that comes at the end of a day that had, despite everything neither of them had said out loud, turned out to be a good one.